Breaking up with Dave was one of the hardest things I'd ever done, but moving on was proving to be even harder. The nights were the worst, filled with loneliness and the haunting echoes of what once was. That's when I met James, my new neighbor. James had moved in next door just a week after Dave left. He was charming, with a warm smile that reached his eyes, and an easygoing demeanor that immediately put me at ease. It wasn't long before we started spending more time together. Morning coffees turned into afternoon walks, which turned into evening drinks. One night, over a glass of wine, he confided in me about his past, speaking of travels and adventures that made my own life seem mundane. I was captivated. He was the distraction I needed, a balm for my wounded heart. I started to think that maybe things were looking up. My best friend, Emma, was the only one who seemed skeptical. "You barely know him, Sarah," she said, her brows knitted with concern. "Just be careful, okay?" I waved her off, brushing aside her worries. "James is a good guy. You'd like him if you got to know him." A few days later, Emma went missing. She had called me the night before, saying she wanted to talk about something important. Her voice had been strained, anxious, but she wouldn't tell me more over the phone. She never showed up to our meeting place, and her phone went straight to voicemail. Panic set in as the hours turned into days. I reported her disappearance to the police, but their investigation seemed to move at a glacial pace. My mind raced with 1,000 horrible possibilities. I tried to distract myself by spending more time with James, but even his comforting presence couldn't quell my fears. Then one night, everything changed. I was watching the evening news when a segment caught my attention. The anchor was reporting on a body that had been discovered in the woods outside town. My heart dropped into my stomach as they showed a picture of Emma. She was dead. I felt a scream rising in my throat, but no sound came out. The world blurred as tears filled my eyes. The news anchor continued, detailing the police investigation. They had found evidence at the scene that tied the murder to a series of killings that had plagued the state for years. A serial killer, they said, and they had a suspect in custody. My phone buzzed with a text message. It was from James. "I heard the news. Are you okay? Do you want to come over?" I hesitated, my mind a whirlwind of grief and confusion. I needed to talk to someone, to not be alone. I wiped my tears and texted back, "On my way." I walked over to James's house, my heart heavy with sorrow. He greeted me at the door with a hug, his arms warm and reassuring. "I'm so sorry, Sarah," he said softly. "This must be incredibly hard for you." I nodded, unable to find my voice. We sat down in his living room, and he poured me a glass of wine. I took a sip, trying to steady my nerves. "The police think it's a serial killer," I said finally, my voice trembling. James nodded, his expression somber. "I heard. It's terrifying." We sat in silence for a while, the weight of Emma's death hanging heavily between us. As I looked around the room, something caught my eye, a photograph on the mantelpiece. It was a picture of James with another woman, her face strikingly familiar. "Who is she?" I asked, pointing to the photo. James glanced at the picture, his face tightening for a moment before he forced a smile. "Oh, just an old friend." A sense of unease prickled at the back of my mind. I finished my wine and excused myself, saying I needed some time alone. James walked me to the door, his concern palpable. "If you need anything, Sarah, you know where to find me." Back at my house, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. I dug through my phone, looking for the police's number, and found the detective assigned to Emma's case. On a whim, I decided to call him. "Detective Harris," he answered, his voice gruff. "Detective, this is Sarah Carter, Emma's friend. I think I might have something important." He asked me to come to the station. When I arrived, I showed him a picture of James and the woman from the photo. He stared at it for a long moment before his face went pale. "Where did you get this?" he demanded. I told him everything, about James, the photo, and my growing suspicions. Detective Harris excused himself and returned with a file. He opened it to reveal photos of various crime scenes, each more gruesome than the last. And there, In one of the photos was the woman from James's mantelpiece, lying lifeless in a pool of blood. My stomach turned, and I felt the room spin. "He's the one, isn't he?" Detective Harris nodded grimly. "We believe so, but we need more evidence. Can you help us get him to confess?" I agreed, though fear gripped my heart. That night, I invited James over, trying to keep my voice steady. "I just need someone to be with," I said. He arrived, his usual warm smile in place, but there was a glint in his eyes that sent shivers down my spine. We sat in the living room, and I casually steered the conversation toward Emma and the recent murders. "Isn't it strange how close to home this all is?" I asked, watching his reaction. James tensed, his smile faltering. "Yeah, it is," he said, his voice tight. I pressed on, feeling the adrenaline surge. "It's almost like the killer could be someone we know." His eyes darkened, and for a moment, I saw a flicker of something terrifying. Guilt, anger, something primal and dangerous. He leaned in closer, his voice a low whisper. "You shouldn't say things like that, Sarah. You never know who might be listening." My blood ran cold. I excused myself to the bathroom, my hands shaking as I texted Detective Harris to send the police. When I returned, James was standing by the mantelpiece, the photo of the woman in his hand. "I see you've been looking around," he said, his voice eerily calm. "Who is she, James?" I demanded, my voice trembling. "What did you do to her?" He smiled, a chilling, predatory smile. "Let's just say she's not around anymore." My heart pounded in my chest as I backed away, but James advanced, his eyes locked onto mine. Just as he reached for me, the sound of sirens filled the air, and the police burst through the door. James was arrested, his mask of charm and warmth replaced by a cold, calculating stare. As he was led away, he turned to me and whispered, "This isn't over, Sarah." In the days that followed, the police uncovered a trove of evidence linking James to the murders. My life would never be the same, the shadows of that night forever haunting me. Emma's death, the close call with James, all of it left scars that would never fully heal.